Welcome to the Storypowers Podcast, a show about the power of stories, the people who tell them, and why you should be doing it too. I'm your host, keynote speaker and storytelling coach, Francisco Mahfuz. My guest today is Marc Ensign. Marc is a keynote speaker, best-selling author, and Broadway musician. He's also the founder and big cheese at LoudMouse, a personal branding agency empowering speakers, authors, coaches, and entrepreneurs who want to impact the world. And as you'll find out today, Marc is a complete and total dick. And that is definitely not what you think. Ladies and gentlemen, Marc Ensign. Marc, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I like that puzzled look on your face when you say Broadway musician.
Well, I mean, there's many job titles that sound a bit confusing, but Broadway musician is probably not one that you expect to see next to anything else.
Right, of course.
You know, if you're a Broadway musician, you're a Broadway musician. You know, this is the peak of your professional and personal lives. You know, what are you doing other things?
That's right. It is a strange path to connect the dots. I'll definitely admit to that.
Mm-hmm. And there's something I wasn't 100% sure of. You know, looking at your blog and the website and everything else. Are you still a Broadway musician?
No, well, actually, unfortunately, nobody's a Broadway musician right now, just because Broadway is closed.
Well, yes, yes.
But I still sub, so I don't do it full time. I do it more now. It's become like, which is even funnier, a side hustle. Like Broadway has become Broadway has become my side hustle. So I fill in for a couple of shows on tour every a couple times a year.
Which shows?
The main show is Rent. That's the main show that I've done. But I've also done Smokey Joe's Cafe and Jesus Christ Superstar and a couple others.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to thank you is that I've had people all my life telling me I'm a dick, and I understand that was always a compliment. I was getting that wrong.
That's right.
Right?
Well, I can't say because we don't know each other well enough yet. It could be a lowercase d, or it could be an uppercase d. It makes all the difference. The capitalization changes everything.
Right. Should we explain to anyone who has absolutely no clue why we seem to be so fixated on this word? And we're not teenagers anymore, so that's not okay to do in public.
I think there's an opportunity here to make people listen to the very end, and we'll tell them before we go.
Why? Okay, that might scupper some of my conversational plans for this afternoon. But
that's right. So I recently wrote a book called "Be a Dick." It came out about a week or two ago, and it is not what it seems. It is actually it starts off as it's a story-based book, parable almost, but it is a true story about a moment in my life where I was kind of in that mid-nervous breakdown that we all go through at in our early 40s, midlife crisis, whatever you want to call it, where I had this vision.
I call that right now.
Yes, exactly. Like right steeped in the middle of it right now.
Yes.
But it was that, I grew up with this idea that I was going to make this big difference and I was going to change the world. And here I am at 40 years old and I have a job and I'm working and I have a family and the white picket fence and the 2.5 kids and all the stuff that you're supposed to have and the mortgage payment. And it really just kind of hit me that wow, what have I done to really make a difference in the world? Now, at the time, I had a healthy, happy family, and I mean, I still do. I don't want to make it sound like I ditched them. And I had a good career, and I was playing music, and I had started a company. I was successful by all means, but I was unfulfilled. And so, I did what any normal person would do in that moment, and I sold everything I owned, and and I dragged my family away from their friends and everything that they knew, and we moved sight unseen down to Tampa, Florida, from New Jersey, which is about 1,200 miles, or however many kilometers that it comes out to. I don't know where.
Tampa.
So I always loved the Gulf Coast, and I had a client that was in Destin, Florida, which is right on the Gulf Coast, but it's very touristy. And every corner, there was a t-shirt store. And I was like, well, I don't want to live there. Like that, like that doesn't look like a very fun place to live because it's just, after a while the tourists get in the way. So we followed the Gulf Coast around, and then there was like Tampa. Like I've been to Tampa, like when I was on tour with the show. I remember Tampa being kind of cool. So I was like, we should just move there. And we also were thinking about Colorado, but I didn't like the idea of being landlocked because I do like the beach. And so we moved and we sold everything, got in a van, and started driving south. And we got here, and when you make a mistake or you do something and instantly go like, you instantly kind of correct yourself. It was like one of those kind of moments, but like I sold everything, including my house. Like there was no correcting this. Like I was in. And so I started having a little bit of a, like, oh my God, what have I done? When you start really second guessing yourself and really beating yourself up, and then it starts piling up, and the stress level goes up, and you did, you've convinced yourself you're just in the middle of this bad nightmare, and that's where I was at. And my wife threw me out of the house. She's like, not permanently, just like go for a walk, get rid of whatever this is. And then come back and hopefully you'll have walked it off. And so that's what I did. She made me take the kids with me, so I didn't run away or just start running north. I walked about 7 or 8 houses down, and that's when I bumped into my neighbor Dick, who was this guy in his, probably at the time he was in mid-60s. And one of the kindest people I've ever met, just an extraordinary human being. And so this book is about, me at my worst, meeting this guy that becomes my mentor and teaches me all of these incredible lessons about what I eventually coined what it takes to be a dick.
You said something before when you described the book, and I think it's an interesting way to describe a book. You said it's a story-based book. My first reaction to that is, first, isn't every book a story-based
I
book?
guess so, yeah.
And then I thought, well, it should be if it's not. But that's very much what it is. And it is a story, and it's a very easy to read story. We met just a week ago or so, and you were kind enough to send me the book, which I read in I think a couple of hours, and then immediately felt guilty that you sent it to me, and then I went and bought it and left a review.
Oh, thank you for that.
But the main thing about it is how it is very much a story, and it's a story that pulls you along. So when you read the subtitle of the book, it's easy to think that it's going to be a lot more preachy than it actually turns out to be. And I think I've read or I heard you say somewhere that there were versions of it that there weren't anywhere like that final version, right?
So I had written, this is not a joke. I mean, I had written the book, I think it was like 17 or 18 times. This is over the course of a couple of years, where I had this story. I was pregnant with this story, and I just couldn't quite figure out how to put it into words. And so, what we often do sometimes is we overthink things, and so I created a very nonfiction version of the story, where it was basically the story, as you know, it breaks down my interactions and my relationship with my neighbor Dick into these 12 principles. Be kind, be helpful, be humble, be compassionate, all these different principles. And so what I would do is I would do the first half of the part about when I learned about being kind from Dick. And then I went 20 pages into like, here's a step-by-step tutorial on how to be kind. And it was brutal. Like, it was like really hard to read. It was like 250 pages by the time I was like, well, this isn't going to work. Like, this is really, it just was really awful to try to read. And so I was like, well, that's not going to work. So, then I was like, I got to get this story out of my head for a little while, and I'll come back to it another day. And so a year goes by, and then I'd start writing again. And when I started writing it this time, because we were all trapped in our house, and I needed something to do. And also, it really kind of occurred to me like, wow, Dick is getting older, and what if he never knows that, how much all of this really meant to me, and he never gets to read this book. And that was a pretty devastating thought. So during this quarantine, I decided to start writing again, and I figured I was going to break out the old versions of the book and then figure out which one I wanted to use, and then just edit it and just send it out into the world. And I hated every single version of it. One was very dark, one was very preachy, one was very tutorial based. One was just like completely incredibly immature with nothing but dick jokes, and and it wasn't, and I was like, none of these are right. I have to start over. So I started over again, and that was this version. And I don't think I could have written this story 5 years ago when all this stuff kind of really started to come into pass.
So I read that, and I read you describing the grueling process of actually getting this book to its final format, and I was a bit confused because we spoke, and then I went and looked you up, and then I found the speech you gave at Inbound, which is the core of the Dick story, and that is very close to what the book turned out to be.
Yeah.
Because it's just you telling the story, and all the sort of what would be the preachy parts are, a slide that you don't even mention. It's just there, and that to me worked perfectly. And then I eventually read the original blog post, because this started as a blog post, right?
Yep.
And the blog post sounds a lot more like what you're describing. It breaks it down a lot. There's a lot of opinion in the middle of it, and what that got me thinking was something I had a guy called Sean Callahan on the show a few episodes back, and he runs a big story consultancy company called Anecdote. And what he finds that works very well for business storytelling is inverting the order that a lot of people do story. So he says, just give a line that essentially tells them what the point is going to be. Mm-hmm. So maybe the point is be kind. And then you just tell the story.
Right.
And then you don't have to go over why this is, because you said be kind. Now I'm listening with that in my head. And it's obvious that you're talking about someone being kind, then I go, I get what you're saying now. So it's sort of a pull approach where you're just bringing them along with the story, and not a push when you're just sending all this sort of morale out. And I was surprised you had that much trouble, because everything I've read from you from the blog and from that speech and this book was just sounded so natural that I thought that this is how you normally tell stories.
It is, and I think that when I say that I had trouble with it, I think it was, I mean, because it's a story, like these are facts, and it was just a matter of just telling the facts and all that. I mean, it's not like I'm like, geez, I wonder how Harry Potter is going to get out of this one. Like, it wasn't that. I didn't have that kind of trouble. It was really a matter of overthinking it and needing this to be bigger than it needed to be. So for example, like having to, well, how am I did research on how to be kind and how to be compassionate, how to be vulnerable. I was reading books on all this stuff, because like this had to be the Bible on all these 12 principles, when really, when you look at each of the principles, it's really so innate to us as human beings. Like we are kind by nature, and we are compassionate, and we are, thoughtful and helpful, and all these things. The majority of people, we just need to be reminded every now and then. And so it doesn't need like this step by step, and and like this the level at which I had would overthink it. I need this thing to be 300 or 500 pages, and I need it to be this this huge ordeal of a story, as opposed to, why don't I just tell people what happened? And I think, and this is totally by accident, because I obviously didn't hear your podcast before I wrote the book, but I decided to name. I had all these weird titles for chapters, and then you had to like kind of, it was encrypted as to what the lesson was, and then I decided to change the titles to each of these different principles. So the title is Be Kind, and then here's the story. Very much like what you were saying earlier, totally by accident. That wasn't like done on purpose by any means. But it is that, and I found that really set the tone for what you're about to read. And I think there's a lot of truth to that.
I blame Superman. And
Okay.
the reason I blame Superman is, and again, I hadn't read anything of you talking about, your fascination with superheroes when you were a kid. You said something like you wanted to change how the world spins.
Hmm.
And I thought, hold on, that this is a very peculiar way of describing that you want to
Right.
affect the world. And I thought, who is to change how the world spins all the time? And again, I don't know if it was a Superman reference, but it's clearly sounded like a superhero reference. And then the more I read your stuff, then it's pretty obvious that this is the type of stuff you used to like when you're a kid, as did I, and perhaps this is something that is a problem with stories. Is superheroes are great, but they are terrible for people trying to figure out how to tell stories, because it's all about these big things, right? Everything
Right.
needs to be cosmic. Everything needs to be, the world is now in danger and you need to save it. It's not, this tiny obstacle that I need to overcome, because that doesn't make for great adventures or great Hollywood movies. It always has to be big. Whereas actually, I think would argue, and I think your book supports that, the small stories that you can relate to are way more likely to be meaningful because you can relate to them. Whereas if you're talking about, if Dick was this guy who had climbed Everest or whatever, he went to Africa and lived there for 30 years doing charity and nothing but charity, it's hard to say, I want to be like that guy,
Right.
because we don't really want to be like that guy, really.
We don't really want to.
We don't really want to be like that guy. And by the way, I don't think we actually went into any specifics about like the type of stuff that Dick did. So of all the many things that he did that influenced you and that made him a sort of a mentor for you, can you just share one of them?
Sure. And just to take a quick step back, but as far as changing the way the world spins or the Earth spins, or knock it off its axis, like I use very extreme language, and I do that on purpose because that's where I think my head was at, and I think that's where what a lot of people think. I think people in general come up with something that's so incredibly impossible. Like there is absolutely nothing I could possibly do in any way, shape, or form that will change the way the Earth spins. And so I set that up as a goal for myself. So just to ensure that I fail miserably at it. And I think a lot of us do that. And then we go like, geez, I guess I just don't matter. My life doesn't matter. What have I done? Like, yeah, well, look what you're putting yourself up against. You've created this impossible goal that you don't stand a chance with. And so that's where I was at as a kid. And as I grew up, it just became a more adult version of that. I have a friend of mine who built an orphanage in the Dominican Republic. I mean, and in my mind, it's like, wow, that is a guy that is changing the world. I wouldn't even know where to begin with that. Like, another friend who raised money by walking from Tampa to California. And he raised a bunch of money for a good cause, and he got a lot of news and press over it and stuff. And again, like
people. Just making us look bad.
Right, make me like I got a wife and kids. Like like I'm winded when I walk up around the block, with the dog. Like it, like I'm not walking 3,000 miles to raise. Like I just don't have time. Like I don't have the energy, and I don't know. I don't even know where to begin with that either. And so I have all these stories of friends that are doing these incredible things, and I'm not one of them. And so I must not matter. And what I really learned from Dick is that it really is the small things that make the big difference. And one of those, and the one that really set me off, like, okay, this is more than he's just a nice guy, was after I had been living in Tampa for about a month. It was my birthday, and he had stopped by, which was always kind of odd because it was more me stalking him than him stalking me. So I was
neighbors that stop by are a very strange thing.
It's it is like oh, it's okay. Is like the neighborhood on fire? Or are you here to steal something from?
I live here in Barcelona, right? And my apartment, there's a big terrace on my apartment, and there's the neighbors on the other side. They have a big terrace. They are about our age. They have a kid who is about the same age as my oldest daughter, and now their youngest kid goes to the same daycare as my daughter. we've never exchanged 3 words. Now that's what neighbors are, really.
Right. And if they did actually stop by and we just want to stop by and say hi, you close the door and say, all right, so we were living near psychopaths. We need to move.
Yeah. Yes, what's
we
wrong
can't
with you people?
we can't live here anymore.
We should only communicate through, passive aggressive messages slipped under the door.
That's right. Smile and nod. That's your job. Just smile, do the cool guy nod, and keep walking. But so he had stopped by and like something was obviously up, and he's like, I just noticed on Facebook that your birthday's coming up, and I know that you left your entire family, you're here, you don't really know anybody, and so I wanted to do a little something for you. Now, just a little bit of background. Dick spent 50 years as a producer for some of the biggest sports games, and
Producer, right?
Just basketball, like World Series, the Olympics, like you name it, like all the biggest in the world. And so one of the things that he had since half retired, and one of the things that he was still doing was the Little League World Series, and he was gone for about a week producing the Little League World Series, and so he came back, and he had said that I have a little something for you for your birthday. Make it a little special, being that you're going to be alone. And by alone, I was with my family and stuff, but still, like all my friends were gone. I didn't have any friends in the neighborhood yet. And he had a baseball that he had signed by all the retired, not all, but like a handful of retired Red Sox players. But that's my team. And so he had gotten this baseball at the Little League World Series, and then in the booth and in the audience, he found any retired Red Sox player he could find, and they signed it, and it was a gift for me. And it didn't cost him anything. Took a little bit of time to do it, but that's about it. And yet, it just was the most thoughtful thing that anybody's ever done for me. Like I didn't really know the guy that well. We had hung out a couple of times, just walking our dogs. He had gone through all this trouble to do this for me. I was at the top of his mind when he was, 1,000 miles away working. And that to me was really special. That showed me that, like, okay, this isn't just like a be nice when you see somebody walking down the street kind of thing. Like, this guy was always looking for ways of making the world a little better for the people in his corner of the globe. Like, and that's really what this came down to. And it was just those little things like this. He did not build an orphanage in the Dominican Republic, and he did not walk 3,000 miles, to raise money for a cause. He just had a baseball signed, and in my world, it was equally as impactful. It just changed things for me. And so that was probably the most, and that's the chapter called "Be Thoughtful."
I'm not a big believer in, destiny or fate or any nonsense like that. But there's some coincidences that can freak you out a little bit. So I read your book between Saturday and Sunday just now, right? So a couple of days ago. I finished your book, and then I went back to the book I had been reading, which was a book called The Girl with Seven Names, which is about a girl who defected from North Korea. And, in the last part of the book, and she's trying to get her family out, and they are in Laos, and she's ran out of money to bribe people. It's all going horribly wrong. And then there was this tourist that had got into Laos with her, and then she sees him around. And then at some point he comes and asks her, what are you doing here? You've been here for a long time. And she explains the situation to him, and he goes to the ATM, takes out a whole bunch of money, and gives it to her. I give you one chance to guess what this guy's name was.
Was it Dick?
Yep.
Wouldn't stop, really?
Dick. Yeah, I could. The surname doesn't sound like someone who actually, gets Emmys. I checked, but yeah.
So Dick, not the same guy.
Okay. I read. I was like, no. This is too much. So I don't know. Maybe there's a whole army of Dicks out there, doing things and being nice to people and not taking any fame for it. I mean, because and again, this guy was like essential to what happened to her, and then I went and listened to her. She has got a TED Talk with like 14 million views or something, and she doesn't actually. No, she mentions him, but not by name. Like, the guy had made no effort to claim credit. I actually said, I'm not helping you. I'm just I'm just like, these people need help.
Wow.
I can, so I'm helping. I read that. I was like, this is a bit weird.
That is really weird.
I could not have set that up if I had tried. So yeah.
Wow.
So there
Well,
you go.
it's funny because when I first got the box of books in the mail, and like, that's like this very eventful thing, and I almost like, I was like, wow, like, like box of books, like that's really cool, like it really solidified it for me. But what was more important was like, okay, now I got to go to Dick's house and drop them off. And I did, and I brought a couple of books for him and his wife, and it was just a very meaningful moment to me to be able to kind of thank him. And he's just he's very humble in his cool. So how's everything else going? Like I was like, oh my god, he didn't really register with him right away. And then a couple of days later, I get a text from him, and a very, very deep, meaningful text about after he had read the book, and what it meant, and just, I guess, seeing how impactful our relationship was to my life. And then he followed that up with, I'm curious where your life would be right now if my name wasn't Dick. And so I was laughing about it because I started thinking about it, and I was like, well, let me think about that for a second. And I think my life would be the same. Like I would have followed that same path. Extraordinary guy. Like it wasn't about his name. Like, oh, that guy's name is Dick. This should be fun. Like it wasn't that. It
But
was
it does make for a cracking
right.
book title and speech opener.
Of course. So what I came to realize was that if his name wasn't Dick, it would have changed me, but it wouldn't have changed anybody else, because it would have stopped with me. Because nobody wants to read a book called, Be a Good Neighbor. Because it just so happens that like you say, like I'm not that big of a believer in having it all thrown onto your lap. But I mean, I'm in the middle of a midlife crisis. I'm a marketing guy. I moved down the street from a guy named Dick, who is an extraordinary person inside and out. Like it just like it is. There's a lot of things that had to come into play in order for this to work.
And that's true. And I think, anyone who tells stories is also gifted with the ability of making it sound like the story you're currently living through was in a way logical and meant to be. And this thing led to this thing and obviously led to this current thing. But the other thing I was thinking as I read both the book and some other stuff you put out on the internet is there was something I was trying to understand. And then just the other day it came to me, and I actually posted about it. I called it the eye, and I think 100% you have it. And what I described as the eye is this ability to just see normal life, but in a way that is entertaining, that can be inspiring. So for example, there's a line you talked about how the first time you met Dick, it's very hot out, the children are with you, and you said something like, my shoes were melting and the children were picking up leaves to make a shelter from the sun. Right. That's a great line, but most people wouldn't see that. And as I read through the book and your examples of the things that Dick has done, is you have to be sensitive to what you're seeing. And this is one of the reasons why I find some people struggle when they start trying to tell more stories, is they don't see the message or the meaning behind the experiences they've had. Whereas, if you're any good at storytelling or branding or marketing, you're looking at that from all sorts of directions and trying to go, well, this is definitely a lesson in being kind. This is about being humble. Whereas to other people, that wouldn't necessarily be obvious. And there is this situation you describe in the book about the guy who read your stuff and then dropped everything and became a photographer somewhere. And the message he sent you describes what I was trying to describe with the eye. I think what he said, not I think, I have it written in front of me. So what he said was, I appreciate that you can draw truth out of all the nonsense and all the nonsense around, and articulate it in a way that I can be able to hold on to at least one clear thought and continue trudging on. And then I think the next line was, you are changing the world, even if it's only one little seed of wisdom at a time in lots of people's life. That adds up, And that, I think, is also a gift. It's, yes, Dick sounds like a remarkable person, but I think you need to be able to see what's going on in your life, even if it's in retrospect and hindsight, and in all the different ways that what he was doing was remarkable. Because otherwise, it doesn't go anywhere. It's just this cool neighbor you have.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you say that. And I love that third eye, like that idea behind like that third or that eye, that to be able to see that, because I do. I don't know how, I don't know what it looks like, and I don't know, where it comes from, but I see life as a story, and like in a weird way, like things happen to me, and I am able to tell it to people in a way that we're just cracking up, and it's just really funny. And meanwhile, it's just this stupid little thing that to anybody else it would be, easily forgotten. The fact is that we had somewhere around 60 or 80 houses on our block. Dick had a lot of neighbors. Nobody wrote a book about him. Nobody saw, and he was a great neighbor to everybody. Like, it wasn't just me. And when I wrote the first blog post and a couple of people in the neighborhood read it, they're like, "Yeah, he is a really nice guy, huh?" And they agreed with it, but they didn't see it. Even my wife was just like, how do you meet the guy down the street and end up turning it into a story or a book or whatever? So I think that there is a level of observation that storytellers have, where it's almost like they're looking at something, as it's happening, almost like painting creating a painting. It's a different level of detail. It's a way to be able to like capture this moment and like, okay, now how do I regurgitate this in a way that if somebody's not physically here, they can feel how hot it is, or how nice he is, or what he did this, or how this happened, or how I was feeling at the time. And I think that is like a weird, thing that like just comes very naturally to me and to most storytellers. It definitely makes life a little more fun. That's for sure.
I would completely agree with that. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's being a storyteller. I don't know if it's just being in a different frame of mind, where it's very easy to see things as very negative. I just told you just before we started recording how I made the terrible mistake of updating my computer, because I had these important things coming up this week, and I wanted the computer to be at its best. So I thought, okay, great, I'm going to update this operating system that I haven't done for 2 years, and then now obviously it's been 24 hours and I can't get this thing to work at all. And you could choose to be miserable about it and just complain over and over, or you can try and see what's the funny side of it, what's the message behind it. And if you do that, I think life becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that it forces you to have to look deeper than what's on the surface, which is where I think life gets really interesting.
Which I think is a good point to drop, Dick, and and move towards some of the other stuff you do, which I wanted to talk about. So one of the things I think is one of the keynotes you give is about, I think you call it growing your brand from the inside out, which is essentially about teaching companies how to tell their origin story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So can you just tell me a bit about that?
So, I own a branding agency, and what we kind of do is it's not just a typical branding agency like, hey, let's pick which color blue you like and what font works best for you. It really is about creating a movement. Building a brand that has an impact, that does something special, and with that in mind, people don't, we don't do business with logos, and we don't do business with colors, and we don't do, we do business with people, and we do business with companies that make us feel a certain way. And one way to do that is to humanize the brand by being able to tell the story, by being able to, be a little vulnerable, talk about that origin story, not so much from the perspective of, boy, I woke up this morning and here's a picture of me standing next to a Ferrari, because none of us care about that stuff. What we really connect with is, I want to hear about the walls you had to climb and some of the difficulties that you were up against. And so that idea of origin story and of being able to really tell a company or a person's story in a way that connects with people is what really makes people want to do business with you more so than anything else that you create in terms of your brand.
Telling the origin story, I find, is an exercise that is easier when you're dealing with. It's very easy when you're talking to entrepreneurs, startups and things of that nature, because it's very fresh, it's very connected to the person that's going to be telling it. But I find that gets harder and harder. If the company has been going on for a long time, and it's a very large company, I tend to find that a lot of the types of stories that I tell, they just don't give themselves so well to that. So how do you find, when you're dealing with a much larger organization, how does that change your approach to that origin story, or to how you grow that brand from the inside out?
So with a larger company, I mean, obviously nobody, people care less and less as the company gets bigger and bigger in terms of that, that founder or whatever. Like, nobody cares who, the origin story of the guy who developed Coke, like
unless they told us how he genuinely figured out to get cocaine in it.
And, right. With everybody being totally cool about it.
Yes.
We're gonna
But that is a great founder story that no one is telling.
Right, exactly.
Pitch that one to Coca-Cola next time you talk to them.
But once you get to a certain size, like, then the shift kind of becomes less about that kind of founder story and the people within the company story, and becomes more and more about your story within that product. So people don't drink Coke because it tastes good, or because they like the idea that it's going to rot their teeth and cause diabetes. Like, they drink Coke because of that time they they went on their first date with their now wife or husband, and they drank Coke at a movie theater, or how they used to have an ice cold Coke with dad after they mowed the lawn when they were a kid. Like that becomes the story. It becomes like their origin story within the product. Apple notoriously had like this great story with Steve Jobs, and how he left the company and came back, and like the Apple story was such a great story with Steve Jobs at the helm. And once he had passed and Tim Cook came out, like, everyone's like, like, nobody cares about that part of the. Not that they don't care about Apple, like, so like that was like that shift in real time, where it became less about the origin story of Apple, and it became more about our story relationship with Apple, kind of like Coke. And so now, you have all these people running around that are just hell bent on using Apple products for everything, and yet the story, they've started to create their own origin story within that product, because Apple origin story kind of died with Steve Jobs.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that it's difficult for companies to. So I think there's two very different approaches. So one approach is the sort of perhaps more traditional advertising approach, or branding approach, if you want to call it that, where the company is trying to create an identity that the brand represents. And sometimes that has nothing to do whatsoever with the people inside the organization, the people who founded the organization, or even sometimes with the customers. It's an aspirational brand. So it hasn't really got anything to do with the people that are, I don't know, buying a Mercedes-Benz. But that's still very popular. And the other approach that seems to be becoming more and more popular, which I think is part of what you might call inspirational marketing, is finding those very human stories within the company, and in the interactions with the customers, that actually resonate today. Because the bigger story, the bigger aspirational stories, I don't know. I just think the impression I get is that they're a bit tired now. I mean, it's not. I mean, do you really want to see like a fancy car and go, "Oh, this is who I want to be in my life"?
It feels very much out of touch. It feels like it's a bunch of marketing people in a boardroom going, "All right, what can we do to get them to want?" As opposed to really kind of understanding who people are, and and especially I think things have taken a pretty dramatic shift over the past year, because of everything that's going on. We see things differently. I made the incredibly intelligent move of buying a car like 3 weeks before all this stuff happened, and we locked down and all this other.
I'll see your stupid move, and I'll raise you. I made the decision to, after about 10 years of speaking in public and telling stories, to take this thing professionally this year. So I would have taken the car. The car is fine.
You would
sitting there.
Oh, that's funny. Not funny, haha, funny, but
Well,
Uh,
again, we choose to laugh at these things.
right. And so we see things differently because now, I have a brand new car sitting in my garage that has 4,000 or 6,000 miles on it because we don't go anywhere, and so now it's just like, well, I don't really care. Like that car means nothing to me. Like now all of a sudden people are starting to go like, experiences are more meaningful. I want to experience life again. And I think that when that starts showing up in your marketing, create an experience for me. Don't show me like, an expensive car and expect me to go ooh and ah over it because, I think we all kind of realize that, wow, that really is, I'd take a beat up old, 1988 Chevy Cavalier if I could actually go somewhere with it, and experience life a little more.
I had a chat with someone on the show a month or two ago when we were thinking that this was all going to blow over a lot faster than it's looking like it will. And we said that the travel advertising agency is going to have the easiest time of their lives for the next sort of year or two. And they would just show you a destination and say, because you can.
That's right.
Or because it's not home.
Right. Anywhere but here.
Yes, exactly. So what would you consider to be good examples of inspirational marketing? Well, first, how you define that, and what would be a good example, either from your work or stuff you've seen around?
Like one story comes to mind that I just thought was so well done, and I forget the guy's name. I think his name was William. I'm not really sure, but I saw this when we used to go to movies. I saw this like in the opening commercials, and it was a Hershey ad, and there was an older gentleman who was in his 90s. And for the past 30 years, he'd wake up in the morning and he'd go to the store and he'd buy a box of chocolate bars and just start giving them out to people, like walking around town. He had nothing else to do. He just start giving them out. This old guy giving candy bars to people, which they tell you not to take candy from a stranger. And yet we clearly didn't learn our lesson. But and he wasn't like on the payroll. It was just a thing that he did for many years. And Hershey caught wind of it and decided to do like a commercial, so to speak. It was like, 2-minute spot telling his story. They weren't selling Hershey bars. They weren't, it wasn't an ad for Hershey. They were just telling the story of this guy that was doing this great thing, who was a dick, if you want to call him that. Mm-hmm. Who was doing this great thing and using Hershey bars as the vehicle in order to spread a little joy or whatever. And what was so great about it was it didn't end with like so go to your local store and buy a Hershey bar. It was about the guy. And you left going like, feeling really good about seeing all these kids smile, and everybody was like, they knew when they saw him, they come run up and give him a hug and they get their Hershey bar and all that. Just the joy in all these people's faces. And it was, tied to Hershey bars indirectly. And it wasn't pushy. It wasn't preachy. It just felt really good. It was a little bit of something that we all needed. It just the way they position Hershey within the story is where it almost felt like an ad placement where it was just so indirect that you got the point and you wanted a Hershey bar when it was done.
Yeah, there's this idea that advertising for a long time was showing the customer who they would be if they bought that product. I heard Donald Miller talk about how he used to see this ad about this great knife, and the guy is just sort of MacGyvering around, and the car is locked and it falls into the water, and then he gets the knife out, and he's like, he says, I would never have any use for that knife, but I want to be that guy. That's it. I just want to be that guy. And then a friend gave him the knife, and he just said, I just feel I'm more proud of myself for being the kind of person who has this knife that I'll never ever use, apart from maybe cutting an avocado. But I think that approach, it's so obvious nowadays that if all you're doing is this is an actor and this is a situation we're putting on just for you in a TV ad, the impression I get is that it doesn't have the same impact anymore. Where if it's just this amazing old guy who just happens to be handing out Hershey's. Like, could be any other product. Luckily for Hershey's, it was Hershey's.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure there's like a guy that's doing it with Coke also, and there's a guy that's doing. They just haven't found him yet, or they're not looking. It's you got to remember that like now we're in that day and age where like when's the last time you actually watched a commercial? We have Hulu and Netflix or, DVR or whatever. Like nobody watches commercials anymore. So 99% of these companies that are putting together Mercedes ads or whatever are wasting their money because nobody's watching them. But it's the ones that are like that are meaningful, that have some kind of, that are story based, that are funny, that are shareable, that make us go like, oh my god, you're not going to believe this commercial, and then we post it on Facebook, and now we're purposely watching commercials. Like we're seeking out and watching commercials on purpose, because otherwise they wouldn't be in front of us. So you have to make something that touches people, or makes them laugh, or entertains them, or tells some kind of story that people want to spread and share with somebody else. Because if you don't, you've just wasted a lot of money. Hiring Matthew McConaughey to drive around, and try to sell cars.
And McConaughey around.
Yeah. It's got to be something that really grabs you. Otherwise, we're not going to share it. And we're not going to, if we don't share it, it's not going to get in front of people, because there are no commercials anymore.
The other aspect of that I think is very important, and maybe can start changing the opinion that a lot of people like you have, where marketing has perhaps done less good to the world than we would want it to do, is that some of the best stories that you can ever possibly tell are the real ones that come out of you behaving properly towards the people that come in contact with you. So, I was telling you about how I upgraded my Mac software. The whole thing went to hell. But I sent I logged on to the Apple website at like 4 a.m. in Spain, and they called me back with a customer call, even though I'm 3 years past my warranty, at 8 a.m. And I've now had 3 or 4 calls. They're trying to solve it. Every time I talk to them, I say, listen, we got this. Don't worry. We still have some stuff we can try. We'll be fine. Do you want us to call you back, or would you rather call? So I've had an amazing interaction with them. And I will tell people about it. I'll say, yeah, they screwed up. There's stuff they could be doing better. But they're owning it, and they're dealing with it. And those are stories that companies like Apple actually know about, which is why they have this practice, I don't know if you heard about, where at the Apple Store every single day, the team leader asks all the staff, who gave you, who got a 100 score, or whatever, however measure they have for that, or 5 stars or whatever. And the guy's like, oh, I got one this afternoon. Okay, what happened? Well, the customer came in with this, and I did that for him, and that's. So they're collecting those stories, and I don't know if they ever use them outside or just internally, but those are happening every day, and they're very powerful, and they're human, and those I think will resonate with other people, and they will be inspirational.
Yeah, and so I in preparation for the book launch, I had gotten shirts printed for the book, and it was from the cover of the it was the cover where it said, don't be a dick, and then don't was crossed out, and which has got to be like when you're on the receiving end of like an order, go like, oh, got a new order in, and then you look at it like it's got to kind of make you think. But I went through Custom Ink, and I was only ordering 3 or 4 dozen shirts, so maybe 50 shirts total at the most. And I totally got the date screwed up. I thought it said that they would be delivered on Tuesday the 4th or something like that. But what it was going into production on that Tuesday, and it was going to be another week and a half or something like that before I'd have them. And I needed them the week after, the Monday after. And so I reached out to him. I said, hey, look, I know that it's going into production. Is there any way we can speed it up? Like, what would it cost to have these things overnighted, or have production, sped up so I can get them quicker? And so she wrote back, and she said, I've already upgraded your production time. So now they're going to be printed tomorrow morning. They're going to be sent tomorrow afternoon overnight, and you'll get them on Wednesday morning. And we've waived all the fees. And I was like, wow. So like, I mean, shaved a week and a half of the turnaround time. So I wrote back to her, and I was like, look, I really have to thank you like that. You have no idea that helps me out. A lot of stress off my plate. I appreciate it. And I just need you to know that be a dick is actually a good thing. And I explained the story in a couple sentences. And I said, so by you doing this was very much like a dick move. And, and as a thank you, I'd like to send you a copy of the book. Send, if you could send me your address. And her response was, too late. I already bought it yesterday. And so like that to me was just extraordinary, like over the top customer service, and so what do you think happened next? I told everybody that story, and I tagged them on it, and I told the story 100 times to anybody. If you ever need T-shirts, these are the guys to go with, and as a result, like I've created my own commercial, for them. It didn't cost them anything. It cost them $20 in expedited shipping or whatever. Nothing.
Yeah, it's funny, perhaps a little tragic, that it would take a very, very long time after our marketing advertising have been with us for people to start realizing that all you have to do is excel with your customers, like provide them with a lot of value, be nice to them, go over and above to help them, and then that is your best advertising. James Bond also works. Spend a whole bunch of money, place some products there. But this stuff I think that these are the things that will keep people customers for a very long time. I mean, it will take a lot from Custom Ink if you ever need shirts again. They will have to screw up so badly to get rid of the karma they accumulated with you that you'd have to think that cannot be done. So they've got a customer for life. And even if they haven't, if they're not getting more business from you, they'll get word of mouth for life. And
sure. Well, and not only that, but the next time I need shirts printed, I'm not going to even shop around for price. Like I'm just going to go right to the source. Why would I even look to see what it costs anybody else? I know what I'm getting. I know that they're going to deliver because of that experience. And I had a similar experience with JetBlue. I was flying to Boston for something. The flight was supposed to leave in 5 minutes, and the plane that wasn't even there yet. And so I tweeted something that was just like, "Hey, is it a bad sign if the plane, if you're supposed to be leaving in 5 minutes and the plane isn't here yet?" And so they were.
That's a dick move. A lower case.
No, but I was just kidding. Like it was a joke, and so they had responded. We're really sorry. What can we do? And so my response was like, don't worry about it. Like this happens. You guys were actually, like on the app, it said that the flight was an hour late or whatever. I was just having fun. And they're like, if there's anything we can do, let me know. So, and I have to find these tweets because they're so funny. And so I said, oh, well, if you're asking if there's anything that you can do, I'd like to steer the plane. And so the response was like, they're like, well, that's not even an option. Like I was like, I'm not looking to take off or land, but like, let me just hold the wheel a little bit. And so we can't do that. Is there anything else we can get you? So I was like, well, what about unlimited snacks? And so they're like, done. And so it was this really funny back and forth, and we're just having a good time with it. And then 2 months later, I'm flying and
hold on, just a second. You do realize that the things you're asking them to do when they say, what can we do for you? You're not asking for a reimbursement of the ticket. You're not asking for an upgrade. You're not asking for things that normal grown-ups would ask for. You're asking
right.
to pilot the plane or to have unlimited snacks.
Well, I think either one of those options were really great. So
listen, you at some point of the book you mentioned the Wonder Twins, and I got that joke. Right? I got that joke. So we're on the same side. I'm just pointing it out to the audience that there's something odd about your request.
Something a little cockeyed. But the funny thing with the whole with that whole interaction was I was flying somewhere else a couple months later, and I was getting on the plane, and I tagged JetBlue that I was like, about to board the JetBlue plane or whatever, and their response was, we just radioed in and had extra snacks brought on the plane for you, or something along those lines. More unlimited snacks. And I was cracking up because and I know how it works. I know I'm in they have some kind of software that pulls up the last tweet and it just maintains a conversation or whatever, so they can in case there's back and forth. I know there was a couple different social media people that I probably spoke to over the course of this whole thing, but because of that moment. From now on, the first place I go is JetBlue. If I'm flying somewhere, does JetBlue fly there? Because I want to keep that conversation going, and I want to have like that was it was a level of customer service that was above and beyond that I want to, like I never got that from American Airlines or Delta or anybody, all these other airlines. But JetBlue really came through.
We've we've had so many hiccups technically with this recording that I'm aware that we are well past the time that we said we would record for. So I just wanted to circle back to Dick, and I just wanted to ask you, because I was looking at your speaker page, and you have at least the 3 talks that people most ask for. Is Dick there? Because he doesn't seem to be there. Well, how come is it? I mean, this is how you change the world. You're gonna change the expressions, be a dick and dick move and whatever else you can come up with to riff on that.
Oh well, the community are dickheads.
There you go. They're perfect. How come? Please tell me that this is in the works, because it has to be. You have to get it in there somewhere.
It is. It hasn't been up until now because there was no book, and because there was no book, it became. I got a lot of pushback from people that were just like, well, it's a little too vulgar for what we want to do. And I had a very good friend of mine who's a professional speaker, and he had told me, he's like, look, you can't tell that story because you'll never work at like, Google or Chick-fil-A or any of these like big, corporate speaking gigs. So, and then one morning I woke up and I was like, well, I'm not speaking there now. Like, so who cares?
It's not as if they're hiring you over and over and saying,
exactly.
Listen, mate, that dick story, you have to let that go. Like, you cannot use that here.
So, because the thing is that there's just like, and this is done on purpose. There's a lot of shock value with the title and with the name of the talk and everything else. And although all these principles are like so valuable within a company, or within community, or it's incredibly important. The delivery is, because with that title, has got a shock value, and if there's no book attached to it, it's not clear. Like it takes too much digging to figure out what it really means. So now that the book is out, very similar to your scenario, like, now I'll do a lot of talks on this because everybody's going to want to hear this story now that nobody's speaking anymore.
or you can Trojan horse it. That story 100% would be a crowd favorite if it's a crowd favorite. So the talk doesn't need to be called why being a dick is great for your business, or whatever the corporate version of that's going to be. But if it just needs to be there.
There's something powerful about standing up in front of a room of people and just saying, my name is Mark and I'm a dick, and then waiting and just letting them soak that in for a second, and then getting into it. And I do get into, like, within the first 30 seconds about that this is about my neighbor Dick. And because otherwise, if you leave them too long on that, it's too horrifying. Like, they're filling out the comment cards.
Well, you reached out to me and you said, "Hi, my name is Mark and I'm a dick," and and I saw that you had written a whole bunch of stuff, and I just immediately started typing saying you had me a dick.
That's right.
I think I 100% agree with you. I also think that, having seen people like Scott Stratton speak, I mean, he's saying way worse stuff than kind of a puerile teenager dick joke, and it's just couched in a way and that it makes sense, and it depends on who the people you speak to as well. I mean, there is 100% a market for companies that would not flinch at the idea of a talk called "Be a Dick," why blah 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 blah. But even if you didn't want to do that, just stick the story in there, and because because it's a great story with a great message, as you well know. It just needs to be there, because that's the one that I've seen lots of other stuff that you do, and all of it's cool, but it's not this.
Right. And now this is one of those things that, like, when I put the book out, I knew that I was like, okay, am I ready to be the dick guy? Because that's what this is. It's like this becomes like the, your opus, or whatever. Like this is going to be the thing that you get to be known for. Like, are you ready for it? And now my kids know that their father's.
It's so terrible what it says about us, but definitely me, how this doesn't stop being funny to me. And I keep in my head, it's like, no, you have to hold on to this one. And I just, I've probably not said about 15 dick jokes throughout this whole episode. Yeah. This is awful.
It's it's one of those things that like my 10-year-old self is like so proud. Just like somehow you figured out a way to make a living telling dick jokes.
Your kid Zach must be cloud nine. My dad has a book called Be a Dick.
he will actually, he says he'll say like he'll call me a dick or so somebody's a dick or whatever, and he says all the time, he's like after he says, he goes, you can't get mad at me. I'm like, I know you don't have to say it with such an evil smile on your face because you know what you're doing.
Well, you've made your bed, and I'll say no more.
Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, let's just leave it at that. Marc, where can people find you? So the book is out now.
Yes.
It's called Be a Dick. It's amazing. If people look for it, they'll find my 5-star review in there. Why did I name it? I think I said you never look at dicks the same way again. Or something like that.
That's probably my favorite part, or like all the reviews of like what people come up like, I want to see dicks everywhere, was like one of them. I was like, that's so good.
So the book's out everywhere. Very strongly recommended. What else? Where else can people find you?
So yeah, the website for the book is iwanttobeadick.com, and my personal site is marcensign.com. It's marcensign.com. LoudMouse is loudmouse.com as well.
Cool. I'll put all of that in the show notes. It was a bit bumpy, but I'm very glad you reached out.
Right.
I'm very glad you did this. This was tremendous fun.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Take care of yourselves. And until next time. I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, I'd love for you to subscribe and leave us a review or a rating on the Apple Podcasts app. It's very easy. You open the app and find this show. Then scroll down a little, and when you see the stars, tap. I'd really appreciate it, and it does help other people find us. And if you'd like to get in touch or find out more about what I do, reach out to me on LinkedIn or visit my website, storypowers.com.